That's awesome. Well, the journey to wait is not easy, and we want to just understand it from one more dimension. And so tonight, I want to invite one of my really good friends, mentors, and colleagues in ministry, Pastor Randy Roberts. We're going to give him a round. Thank you so much for being here, Pastor Randy.
This doesn't look old school, does it? I know you're sitting there thinking, man, I wish I could speak after Angela, after that amazing, I wish I was the next person at the end of the evening. So what I'm going to ask Philip to do, Philip, I'm going to take a very short time here, and then we can do the Q&A because I think that's what's going to be more beneficial. I can't tell you how much I have appreciated the deep theological tone of all that has been said. The realities of being grounded in our faith, the grace of God for those who have brokenness in their lives. I'll tell you one thing I've learned over the years of pastoral ministry as well as being a marriage and family therapist and having the sacred honor of being in the lives of human beings at their most raw moments. And that is that every one of us in some way is broken. We may manifest that brokenness in different ways, but we're broken somewhere along the way. And that often that includes sexual brokenness. And for that reason, I'm so thankful for the grace of God that not only forgives, but that restores. So I've deeply appreciated the tone of that throughout the evening. I don't want to talk to you so much about that, though, in these few moments. What I would like to talk to you about, though, is a little bit about thinking how sexuality, in terms of a relationship that you think may be a permanent relationship, can function, how it can help you see things more clearly or how it can obscure things. The first thing I would say is this. When sex gets involved in a relationship, the energy in the relationship flows in that direction. Whether that is your first date or the night of your wedding. It's just a reality that the bondedness that comes and the experience that which brings you together is so powerful that it will obscure your sight and your vision to other realities about the relationship. If that comes at a good time, if that comes the night of your marriage, it's probably a good thing. You've heard people say, boy, our first year was tough. You know, trying to figure out each other and this thing of living together and another person in my space and all of that. And yet, our sexual experience was a deeply bonding and deeply beneficial experience during that time because it kind of softens the edges and blinds you to some of those other realities. But if that is early, it will do the very same thing. And that can be very dangerous because then you cannot see what you need to see. It was Mark Twain who said, when it comes to marriage, keep your eyes wide open before and half closed after. But the problem is we tend to do the exact opposite of that. And satisfying sexual relationships only increases that. We end up keeping our eyes half closed before, and then we say, I do, and they come wide open. And then we look at the person and say, who are you? You're not the person I married. What happened? Now, there's a model of, and I'm going to give it to you real quickly because there was a book out there. I don't know if anybody picked up the book by John Van Epp, but John Van Epp has a relationship attachment model that I have found very helpful in thinking about these things over the years. He has a theologically titled book, How Not to Marry a Jerk. But John Van Epp has a relationship attachment model that you have to imagine having 5 sliders. Now, sliders are those things that people who work back in booths like that use to control the sound. They slide up and down, want this guy up, this person down, etc. Sliders. Well, Van Epp says you should have a relationship attachment model. There are 5 sliders that you need to be attentive to, deeply attentive to. This first one is know. Know. Getting to know the person. Really getting to know them, and that takes some time. It takes some time, it takes some opportunity to be together in a whole range of different settings. One of the things that I think of when I see shows like The Bachelor and those kinds of things is how totally foreign to life that is. I've always been caught by that term, reality show. That ain't my reality. Maybe it's yours, But it's interesting that in the dating kind of experience, we often do things that are as removed from our reality as they can be. I'm not against those things. It's wonderful, to go out, go down to the beach, to ride a hot air balloon, to go to Catalina. I mean, those are wonderful things. I'm not against any of that. But that's not your life. If you want to get to truly know someone, don't limit yourself to that. Have them come over and help you clean out the garage. That's reality. Then they'll know who you are. Have them see you in your good moments and your bad moments. Then they'll know who you really are. You'll know who they really are. Spend one good session of the flu with them. While they're throwing up, while you're throwing up even better, you'll get to know who they are. Make sure you spend time with them at their home on vacation when the other kids are there as well, and watch how the family interacts and ask yourself the question, do I like this? Do I not like this? Get to know them for who they really are. People talk about living together. I want to live together so I can really get to know the person. That's not the thing that will help you get to know them most. You want to get to know them the best. Share a bank account with them. That's what you should share. That will, in fact, look at the studies. Every study and every survey that I'm aware of continues to say number one reason for breakup in marriage is what? Money. So share a bank account. That'll help you get to know them. Get to know them. This has to come first. This slider has to be the highest. That has to always stay ahead of everything else in the relationship, that knowledge of the person. In fact, a colleague of mine says it this way: the human organ of intimacy is the ear. The human organ of intimacy is the ear. You want to know how truly intimate you are with a person? Don't go to the bedroom. Go to the kitchen, the living room, the backyard, and every other place that you hang out that is non-sexual. And ask, how well do we hear each other? How well do we know each other's heart? John Gottman up in the Northwest, after over 4 decades of research, says one of the most simple findings they've had is that for a relationship, a marriage, to survive and thrive requires about 1 hour of conversation a day. 1 hour a day. And some of you husbands are thinking, oh my goodness, my wife just heard that. Now she's going to expect that. But that's the truth. And now it doesn't all have to happen at the same time, and it doesn't all have to happen to the same depth. But an hour of conversation a day. You have to know the person. Okay? And when we're in dating relationships, we think we have done this far before in actuality we have. It probably takes, someone who write about these things says, at least 3 months, a pretty constant relationship for the person to begin to let down their guard and for you to start to really see who they are. No. Second slider, trust. Trust. Now, you can't get this before that if you want a healthy, safe relationship, but people do it. Trust their hearts, their lives, their bodies, their souls to someone they hardly even know. Van Epp says you've got to start with knowing. Trusting follows that. And the trusting comes based on what you know of them. Does this person give evidence to being trustworthy? A trusting relationship takes 2 sides. On the one hand, it requires trust, which is always a risk. But on the other hand, it requires trustworthy behavior. If you trust without trustworthy behavior, that's just stupid. If you manifest trustworthy behavior and you don't get trust, that's discouraging. So it's a two-way relationship. So you start with knowledge. I know this person. Are they trustworthy? And your trust in them grows as your knowledge of them warrants it. Does that make sense? Third one, rely. You come increasingly to rely on the person because you trust them, because you know them. And as you begin to rely on them, your lives begin to connect at deeper and deeper levels. Your relationship becomes more meaningful. You're able to lean on them. You're able to share more deeply with them because you trust them and you can rely upon them to maintain your confidence, to not disappoint you based on how well you know them. As these happen, as you know them, trust them, and rely on them, then the fourth slider. Remember, each of these is following the other. You always have to keep the ones to the left higher than the ones to the right. You come to this one, and this one is commit. Commit. As each of these moves up, your knowledge of the person, your reliance on the person, your trust of the person, now you can intelligently begin to commit to the person. As you commit to the person, things are at a much more serious level. There's more risk here because if this relationship breaks up, there's going to be much more pain connected with it because of the depth you have reached. Finally, says Van Epp, comes what he calls touch. Touch. This is where you begin to get more physically affectionate. And his premise is this has to follow and lag behind every other of the other four. If you're to have a healthy pair bond, and if you're to have a healthy relationship, psychologically speaking, this is not even approaching it from a biblical perspective, a moral perspective. It is simply saying if you want to build a relationship that has the tendency or even the certainty of going the distance, you will have to put some time in. Good relationships don't happen quickly. If you get this one out in front, way over here, it will blind you to many things that you need to see. So the take-home message from Van Epp's model is if you want a relationship that attaches well, make sure to do the work in the right order and to a depth that meaningfully connects you. Does that make sense so far? Second quick model. This is Robert Sternberg, teaches psychology at Cornell University. This has been around a while, but it's been one of the most helpful and meaningful models to me over the years in just living life in our own marriage, but especially talking to those who are getting married. Van Epp has developed, Sternberg has developed what he calls the triangular theory of love. Maybe I would say it this way. The best kind of married love is made up of three elements. The first one is what Sternberg calls intimacy. Now, by intimacy, what Sternberg is talking about here is you like each other. He's talking about emotional intimacy. You like each other. This is a friendship kind of love. In fact, in the Greek New Testament, there's a word that in English gets translated love that describes this, and it's the word philos or phileo. It describes a platonic kind of love, a friendship kind of love. You have many of those kinds of friends in your life. You are intimate with them in an emotional sense because you share with them. You hang out with them. They know you. You know them. You laugh at the same jokes. You like the same movies. You enjoy doing the same kinds of leisure activities. You're friends. You like each other. That's a very overlooked but extremely important part of what it means to have a marriage that goes the distance. One of the most important questions you can ask about a potential marriage partner is, do I like him? Do I like her? I mean, just like them. Because here's the truth. I just looked it up again, and the numbers are kind of all over the place, so you have to be a bit careful with it. But a married couple in the United States today, the last numbers I saw, has sex probably about 51, 52 times a year, the average married couple, about once a week. When they have sex during that time, they if you count everything involved, 45 minutes to an hour. So let's be generous and say an hour. Okay? So this married couple's having sex an hour a week. There are 168 hours in a week. Okay, so subtract about a third of them for sleeping. Subtract another third of them for working. And you've still got a whole bunch of hours where you're going to be together when you ain't having sex. And if you don't like that person, it's going to be a long, hot summer. Because that's what much of life is made up of. So a key question is, are we friends? Can we talk? Can we laugh? Can we connect? Do we enjoy being together? That does not develop quickly. If you've noticed, many of your platonic friendships you develop with people with whom you have things in common. You're in the same career, you live in the same neighborhood, you have the same sports interests, you laugh at the same kind of jokes and humor, you read the same books. There's a lot that you have in common. However, the way people find spouses today, or at least boyfriends and girlfriends today, often has nothing to do with that. It has rather to do with, looking across a crowded room and your eyes connect and you know. Well, what do you know? Because the truth is, in 99 cases out of 100, that doesn't last. Because you don't have this. And when all of the hormones stop bubbling, you look at this person and think, I don't even like him. I don't even like her. And you know you're in trouble. Okay, so Sternberg's first side of the triangle is intimacy, philos. We like each other. Second side of the triangle, he calls passion. And in this case, he is referring to sexual chemistry. You're attracted to the person. Again, in the Greek New Testament, there's a word that gets translated in English, love, but it's a different Greek word. It's the word eros. That's the word from which the English term erotic comes. It has to do with a sensual love. Has to do with a Song of Songs kind of love. Sometimes I pick up in conversations with Christian young people that there is a certain sense that this is not as important as anything else. Because society has so overvalued it, we get suspicious of that and then undervalue it. People will ask, is it important that I be attracted to her, to him? Well, let me put it this way. If you came to this conference and you've listened and you've thought and you've listened to the exceptional presentations and you say, okay, with my boyfriend, with my girlfriend, I'm making a choice to wait. I make that choice. And you make that choice. And you have no problem living that out. That's a problem. Because if you have no problem keeping your hands off each other now, you're going to have a lot of trouble keeping your hands on each other later. There needs to be an attraction. What I hear the others saying is the fruit of the Spirit in our lives grows things like self-control so that we can make choices. But we want to make that choice. We don't want to have the situation where it doesn't even matter. In fact, that's a very bad precursor to marriage. When I was in my marriage and family therapy program, I had the wonderful privilege of taking a couple of classes from a gentleman who was late in his career. He was one of the fathers of intergenerational family therapy. His name was James Framo. James Framer, I remember coming into class one night and writing on the board his 11 most difficult to treat marriages. The marriages that in his opinion were the hardest ones to treat. I forget now if it was 3 or 4 on the list, but it was high on the list, what he called the brother-sister marriage. He said, this is the marriage where there was never any sense of sexual attraction, but they liked each other. They got along. They thought, this is great. We don't argue, we don't fight, we have a good time together. Sex, but we like each other. He said, and then they'll come in later to therapy trying to light a fire. It's very hard. In fact, ironically, this is one of the areas, one of the facets of relational love. When we're talking about love that can lead to marriage, this is one of the areas of love that works the best when you have to work on it the least. It works the best when you have to work on it the least. In other words, if he's asked you out and you're going out with him, you're thinking, okay, we've been going out now he's going to kiss me tonight, and you're thinking, okay, I can do this. Let me get ready. All right, I can do. Finally, it's going to hit me, and I'm going to. Hey, there's a country song that says these shoes were made for walking. It's time to put them shoes on. Not because this is more important than another area, but because it's just as important as other areas. It's the way God wired us. God who said it's not good for you to be alone. There's an amazing possibility in the book of Genesis. If you read in the book of Genesis, you read the creation of man and woman, you see that the picture you get is Adam is put to sleep and God takes a rib and creates a woman. That is a legitimate translation of the Hebrew in that passage, say Hebrew scholars. But there is another way it can be translated. It can be translated that God put Adam to sleep and he took a side of Adam, separated him in two halves. And out of those 2 halves, he made 2 wholes. And then to those 2 wholes, he said, now come back and become one. So that there is that drive that God has wired within us for a profound and permanent union with another human being. And that drives this right here. Now, some people struggle with that. Several summers ago at our camp meeting here at University Church, I preached a series of sermons on the Song of Songs. I thought Ezekiel was hard. We just finished Ezekiel. I'd forgotten about Song of Songs till just this moment. That was a rough summer. But anyway, we won't get into that. But I discovered it's a very different thing to teach a classroom full of university-age students about issues in sexuality and Scripture than it is to stand before a congregation where there's a 3-year-old over here and an 89-year-old over there and a 13-year-old here. And it's like, ooh, this is a different ball game. And Solomon is saying all this stuff, and I'm thinking it's a good thing this is metaphoric, because if it wasn't, wow. And anyway, just like you saw the picture before that was very good, about the description of song, you just don't want to say to your wife, your hair is like a flock of goats coming down Mount Gilead. It's like, no, I meant that good, But Song of Songs, there was struggle when the canon of Scripture was being formed. People saying, that doesn't belong in Scripture. But in what I believe was a God-inspired decision, there it is in the canon. Because God values this. There's a third, and this I put at the foundation, element in Sternberg's best kind of married love. And this is commitment. Commitment. There's a Greek word in the New Testament that if you've never taken Greek, you see it translated as love and you know what it is. It's the word agape. Agape. It's a selfless, other-centered kind of love that gives of itself, that is committed to the other. This becomes the foundation of the relationship. It's a foundation that grows as you move through these realities. Now, I want you to notice that these kinds of things, even in the best kinds of marriages, can ebb and flow. They can rise and fall. There are times when you feel like you're connecting much better. You're talking while you're laughing, things are going, and then you go through a time of stress at work, stress at school, whatever it is, you don't have much time together, you're short, you're getting on each other, and you just don't feel like you're connecting as friends well. There are also those kinds of things in a couple's sexual life. One of them gets sick. There's a stressful time at work, a baby comes along. And you think, oh my goodness, when was the last time? You think, wow, it's been a while. And then there are other times when you say, it's been a good week. So, those things can rise and fall. They can ebb and flow. This one cannot rise and fall or ebb and flow. The commitment requires a stability and a permanence that, if compromised, will compromise the whole relationship. That's why the need is there to invest thoughtfully and carefully and somewhat slowly in the development of the relationship. Now, I say somewhat slowly. That can depend on a whole variety of factors. It can depend on your age, both of your ages. It can depend on what kind of relationship you have, how much you're together, all those other factors. But the bottom line is, your sexuality is an integral part of the best kind of relationships, the best kind of married love. But if it becomes involved too soon, it can lead you to a blindness that keeps you from seeing what you need to see. Because it's just that bonding. In fact, I think there are at least 4 different realities for which God gave us sex. If you look at Scripture, maybe you can find others. I would suggest there's 4, and I'm not saying these are in any particular order of priority. Number 1, procreation. That's clearly there. That's the way we human beings procreate. There's bonding. The two become one. Earlier we saw a text that even if you are engaged in casual sex, there's still a oneness that gets created. So there's bonding. There's intimacy. The man and his wife were naked and they had no shame. I think one of the best definitions of intimacy is that intimacy is that experience of being fully open with another person without the need to change the other person. And that last phrase is very important, because as soon as you feel like you're someone's home improvement project, you shut down. You can't be intimate anymore. You don't want people rearranging you. But intimacy grows out of the biblical text as a part of what is true of sex. So procreation, bonding, intimacy, and pleasure. Pleasure. I suppose God could have created us in all kinds of ways. To have that whole experience I just described, procreation and bonding and intimacy, by shaking hands or, waving across the room or whatever the case might be. I don't know. But He didn't. He formed us, the psalmist said, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, in a way that makes it profoundly, not only bonding, not only intimate, but pleasurable. So it is a part of God's creation of us as human beings. Being wise about it, surrendering our lives and relationships to God so that we conduct them in ways that are consistent with divine wisdom, will not only make sense, it will not only build strong relationships, but it builds the possibility of lifelong love. So one of my favorite stories about this came from a woman whose name a few of us probably remember it. Many of you don't know the name Ann Landers. But Ann Landers was around some years ago. She was an advice columnist. This was back in the days when people bought newspapers. And Ann Landers was in all the newspapers across the country, and people would write in questions. She would answer them, and they would write in experiences and stories and all the rest, and that was her thing. So somebody wrote into Ann Landers with a story. She said, I just got back from my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, and what a great time we had. And she described the situation. My parents didn't have much money. My dad was a police officer. My mom was a school teacher. When they got married, all they could afford for a honeymoon was driving down to the next town and staying like at whatever the equivalent of Motel 6 was overnight. That was their honeymoon. They decided at that point, we're going to save money, and on our 50th anniversary, we're going to have a blowout honeymoon. Okay, so how are we going to save that money? I said, we're going to save that money. Every time we make love, we're going to put $1 in a jar. And when we get to our 50th wedding anniversary, we're going to take all that money out of there, and we're going on a major honeymoon. She said, this woman who was one of 5 kids, she said, as we grew up, when we got married, every time one of us got married, our parents told us the story and gave us a jar, told us what had happened. And she said, when they told us that, we were just talking about this, we remembered Dad coming home from work and saying hi to us kids, and then kind of looking at Mom and smiling and saying, I got $1 in my pocket. And Mom saying, I know just how to spend it. She said, we just put them on the plane to Hawaii for, I forget what, like 10-day, 2-week vacation, flying first class. We don't know how much they saved, but they could afford that. And as they were getting on the plane, my dad turned around and looked at us and said, tonight we're starting a fund for Cancun. I love that story because it speaks to the power of lifelong love and lifelong healthy sexuality within a committed marriage relationship. It's a beautiful reality. It's a great gift God has given us, and we have the privilege and the honor, when we have damaged it, of being healed and restored by God. And when we have not having to deal with that, but all of us being able to celebrate and thank God for His goodness to us.